Alright, here's an example of an open pore mold. It has some gold flake powder to give it a coating when it's finally cast. Here's an example of a two-part mold held together with rubber bands with a serpentine cut with feeds and vents. Here's an example of a mold that's held together with pins, and what I'm going to do is open it up to put the resin in. It doesn't really have feeds or vents. It has a couple vents maybe. This is the material. It's 36XXX. Used to be Vagabond. Now it's Glenmark. It is a 1-to-1 mix, so equal parts of A and B. And I'm mixing. Probably mixing a little more violently than I normally would. I'm trying not to whip any air into it, but I want it to cure fast for the show. This stuff has a cure time of about 4 minutes, and what I'm doing is spraying a little release on the top of it to pop any bubbles that may have risen to the top. Foam, froth, that kind of stuff. I'm pouring from a center point and letting the material flow around. I'm not just splashing it in. Trying to get to each cavity. If I overfilled it, what I do is I take a tongue depressor stick and actually move it across and even it out so I don't get too much flash. Now I'm putting a little extra material into a syringe. These syringes are reusable. I usually take a knife and cut the little rim off so that the stopper comes out much easier. I just shave it, basically. Bleeding out the air like a nurse would. This is going to hurt quite a bit. Now I'm picking a vent and filling the resin in until it comes out the other side for the other vent. Sometimes you can change your mind on which is a feed and which is a vent, depending on how it flows better. Now I've opened the mold up a little bit and I'm just squirting the material in, and then when I close the mold up, the material will come up and out. Squirt a little bit more on top for a reservoir. Sometimes it's good to beat the molds a little bit so that air bubbles rise to the top. Sometimes you can also rotate it as you're feeding material in. Just kind of give it a swirl. Now I'm putting it into a pressure pot. We have a couple pressure pots at work. This is one of my favorites. It's been in business for over 15 years. Making sure everything's tight. Most pressure pots have a sweet spot. You want to try to always put the lid back on the way you have before, so it's a good idea to mark which way you put it on each time. Now I'm watching the meter there. It's going up to 60 psi. If I go above 60 psi, I'm shutting the valve off at 60. If I went over, there's a safety valve right there, and it would pop. And basically it scares you, but it's actually a safety feature.
This
is the leftover resin.
Gang signed by Goop.
That's my boss being funny while I'm making the video. This is the material curing. Right now this would be pre-B stage. The A stage is mixed. The B stage is when it's actually starting to harden but it's still soft like clay. And this is a separate batch that I wanted to show you how it cures. I've cut some of the time out here to save time. See those little tendrils starting to form in there? They are, that is where it's starting to cure. It's probably the hottest part. Heat helps these things cure faster, and it just eventually flows out through the rest of the resin. Now I'm letting the air out of the pressure pot to show you the parts that were cast before. Always let the pressure pot completely empty before you take it out, or the lid could jump at you, or it'd make a nasty squealing sound as you try to take the knobs off. Here's the open pore mold. You can see that I've got a little bit of resin on the outside making a flash. Sometimes this can help you get the parts out and bring them off in one sheet. Some kit builders will, or kit sellers will sell you this as a kit, you know, with a flash on it. Unless it's easy to take the flash off, I think that's pretty rude. There I'm peeling a little of the flash off. And there's the part. It has a nice little gold finish to it. And that gold is actually a much better than paint because the resin cures to the gold flake rather than it being a paint that can scrape off. I have made parts with using black material and a gold flake, and then using an X-Acto blade actually scraped off where I didn't want the gold, leaving the black behind, or any other color you want. If you do a clear that way, you do clear with gold flake, and then you can light it up from the inside, and then anywhere you scrape, you'll see light through. That's kind of cool for dashboards. Now this is the two-part mold. These are those volcano vents that I was telling you about. They pop off pretty easily. Let's see if we can focus. Yeah. Sometimes I save those and use them again. Most of the times I just chuck them. Now here's the mold coming apart. You can see I have a couple pins in it to help locate it. It's also a serpentine cut. And there's basically a back flap. And then going around that cylinder, I think I've divided it into 3. So I can kind of pry it apart. This one's actually kind of difficult to get out because of all the negative areas. So I might struggle here a little bit. Masuki! Oh! And there it is. It's a pretty neat little engine cone. I actually stick a lens on it and make it a steampunk lens. But it's still a little soft right now. The resin, the parts were only in there for about 15 minutes. But I wanted to show you that you can actually take a soft part that you've cast and actually reshape it to make it a new form. If I wanted to make this kind of a different kind of exhaust, like for a land speeder or something, I could basically shape it, possibly even have a little form that I would push it into, and then so that it holds it there for maybe 20 or 30 minutes while it finishes curing. That's a neat little triangular, you know, exhaust or inlet for something, maybe a Viper.